The letter was waiting on the kitchen table when Mara came back from taking out the trash. It hadn't been there when she left. She knew because the table was a mess of breakfast plates and yesterday's mail, and she would have noticed something creamy and elegant on top of all that. It was there now, thick and off-white, addressed in her late husband's handwriting. Impossible, unmistakable. Her name looped in the same way he looped it the first time he'd written it in a high school yearbook, Mara. She didn't touch it for a long time. The radiator clanked to life and spit its damp breath into the room. The refrigerator shuddered like an old man clearing his throat. Somewhere outside, a dog let out one of those small, muffled barks that sounded like it came from a basement. Her own breath fogged faintly in the cool. When she finally picked it up, the paper felt heavier than paper should feel. Cheap stationery pretends at substance. This actually had weight, like bones under skin. The return address said nothing, but the stamp was the old kind. The kind you have to lick, embossed with the lighthouse from Willow Neck, their lighthouse, the battered thing on the point that had been shuttered since '97. She slid it open with her thumbnail and smelled the past. Cigarettes and winter. Nolan always smelled like that at the end. Cigarettes and winter and motor oil from overtime at the garage. The handwriting was Nolan's without question. A little more careful than his notes on the fridge. A little tidier than the grocery lists where he'd misspell mayonnaise twice and then draw an arrow like the third attempt made it official. The way he wrote the capital M, flourished like a musician tuning, was the same. Mara, you just took the trash out and told yourself you'd wait to open this because you don't like being told what to do. You're telling yourself that now. That's one of the reasons I loved you. You do things your own way. You always did. You're holding this on the edge like it's going to bite. You looked at the clock, 9:14 a.m. You smelled the paper and thought, cigarettes in winter. I never could get you to say tobacco. It was always cigarettes, the ugly word the doctor used at the end. At 9:22, your sister is going to call. Don't answer. She'll ask about the box in the attic. Don't go up there, not yet. When you do, take the flashlight I left in the top drawer. When you're reading this part, you will touch your wedding band even though you don't wear it anymore. You'll feel the groove on your finger. You'll think, I'm imagining it, but you aren't. Skin remembers. You're going to die at midnight. And her first thought was adolescent and stupid. That isn't funny. As if ghosts cared about jokes, about what's in good taste, about how grief ripples through a house so slow you mistake it for silence. Her second thought was meaner, a reflex she'd learned after he got sick. Oh, you're doing it again, writing yourself into the day, dictating from beyond the grave because you were so good at bosses and lists. It didn't fit him. Nolan wasn't bossy, but grief makes you rearrange people after they're gone, like pictures on a wall. You start to see in them what you need to fight. The phone rang in the living room. 9:22 exactly. A little green square of digital time glancing at her from the stove. 9:22. Her sister's name, Kelly, bloomed on the screen. Mara stared at it until the call went to voicemail. The room hummed, as if something under the floorboards was pleased. She set the letter down carefully, as if it might bruise. Okay, she said into the empty kitchen, and the sound of her own voice made her flinch. Okay, Nolan, okay. It shouldn't have been his, that letter. But there were private mistakes in it, small crooked things that belonged to their marriage alone. He'd underlined the part about the groove on her finger twice, gently, as if he didn't want to press too hard and leave a mark. And he always did that when he wanted to be serious without being alarming. He underlined like other people put a hand on your shoulder. At 10:07, the mail came. She waited for it, measuring her breathing. The second page of the letter, the part that told her about midnight, about the attic and the flashlight in the top drawer, had been short, barely 3 paragraphs. The first page had been the prediction game. That page lay crooked beside the coffee mug, its edges darkened by the heat ring. She splayed her fingers on it and counted the pulsing under the pads. The mailman's boots were loud on the porch, heavy, an old rhythm. They made the exact sound Nolan's had made when he'd come in from shoveling, stomping to dislodge the snow, calling toward the kitchen. "You'd think it would fall off sooner or later, March." The slot flapped. The new mail fanned across the entry rug. A glossy pizza menu, a doctor's appointment reminder with a hygienist's too-perfect smile, a fat brown envelope with her name typed in a font that tried too hard to be invisible. There was no second letter from Nolan, and she felt something angry and small in her deflate. She picked up the brown envelope. It was from the bank. Of course it was from the bank. After a death, the bank arrives like a polite vulture. "Screw you," she said, startling herself again, and left it unopened on the table. She made coffee she forgot to drink. The letter moved with her. A shadow she positioned out of her way, then into it again. She was a weather vane that only pointed toward one thing. At 10:32, the phone rang again. Her sister this time leaving a voicemail across the slow, embarrassed shush of the house. "Mar? I know you're there. It's about the attic box, okay? I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. It just—" She let the message unfurl in the other room while she stood in the doorway and stared up the narrow throat of the stairs. She and Nolan had moved into this house 5 years into their marriage. A year before his cough turned to a hack and the hack turned to an X-ray everyone pretended was a Valentine, full of pretty shadows. The attic had been her mother's, her father's, her grandfather's before that. Attics are where you store ancestor ghosts when you don't have time to properly frame them. The flashlight was in the top drawer, right where the letter said, its rubber grip tacky with age. She flicked it on and on again and watched the beam drill a hole in the hallway gloom. She felt, embarrassingly, like a kid with a toy. "Nolan," she whispered, and this was not angry, this was not adolescent. It was the word you say when you cut a finger and you don't want to see the blood. It was the word before a prayer, before a curse. "If this is you, I—" She stopped. What would she say? Approve? Forgive? Both of those were funny ideas when applied to the dead. The dead don't need your forgiveness any more than they need your permission. The attic door wasn't a door exactly. It was a panel she had to hook down and then pull hard, the ladder yawning with a soft metallic belch. The smell hit her before the light did. Old cardboard, wool, other people's dust. Her father's pipe tobacco hung in a corner even though he'd been dead 15 years. In the winter, mice used to leave polite, soft-heeled tracks along the exposed beams, as if one of them wore slippers. The flashlight found the box like a stage spotlight, square and ugly in the far corner near the single dormer window. The window looked out on the willow tree in the backyard. In summer, its branches would spread like a girl's hair, but now it just rattled. The box had been sealed with tape that had lost its grip. It had something on the lid in black marker that made the hair on her arms rise. Nolan. Private. The handwriting was not Nolan's. Too precise, too narrow. And for a moment the absurd thought came that the box had done this writing itself, using held-breath air as ink. Then she recognized Kelly's hand, careful, pressed, a teacher's hand. The anger was a bullet that whined by without striking. She didn't have energy to be mad at her sister. Not with midnight being something in her hallway now. Not a bedtime and not a metaphor, but an animal that could sit and wag its tail. The tape came up with a sound like a lip being freed. Inside were photographs rubber-banded in bunches, an old metal lunchbox that had belonged to Nolan when he was a boy, the kind with astronauts on it, tinny and cheerful. A spiral notebook with a red cardboard cover, a small cedar box, a pair of sunglasses nobody had worn in 20 years. The smell of cedar was sweet and dry. The spiral notebook stood out because the first page had been partially torn and then folded back. Her flashlight beam jittered as she reached and took it. Nolan's handwriting, no question. She sat cross-legged and turned the page. "This is stupid," he had written at the top in a quick, embarrassed scrawl. There had been a smear of oil along the edge of the page, a fingerprint black as an accusation. "I don't know why I'm doing this, except I keep thinking about that summer I worked at the Dead Letters place, remember? They hired me for 2 weeks to sort mail that never made it. They called it the Dead Letter Office, which makes no sense, a name out of a ghost story. But there are real places for that, real rooms that smell like glue. People send little bits of themselves into the world and they don't get where they're going. Anyway, if you write a letter and it doesn't get where it's going, does it die or does it keep going like one of those balloons kids let go? Nobody knows. Maybe letters don't die, maybe they hang around and find their way when it's time." He had underlined Dead Letter Office 3 times, harder each pass, like he was trying to push the words through the paper. "I saw this thing on TV about this guy who can predict the weather from the way old barometers creak. Like, he can hear the storm 2 days out by listening to antique guys complain. I keep thinking how if you listened to all the letters that didn't make it, if you could stack them and lean your ear against them, you'd hear something. A beat, a hum. Either God or everybody. Maybe, if you put your letters into that stream, they'll find you again when you need them. Stupid, huh?" Okay. He had dated the page January 8th. The year had been smudged, either by his hand or because it didn't want to be read. The next page was numbered, 1. And then, "Mara, you get up at 6:30, say you're going to the gym and don't. You stand in the shower and think about singing. You think about the song with the line about sailors and lights in windows. You cry because you can't find your gray socks with the little ducks on." She stopped reading, at once embarrassed and aroused, a mixture she'd come to know during the hospital months. The intimacy of being watched through time was strangling. The attic air got colder. She lowered the flashlight and saw her breath. She made a sort of rough laugh, and it came out as a cough. "You're an idiot, Nolan," she said. "You beautiful idiot." The cedar box clicked when she opened it. Inside lay Nolan's fountain pen, the one he never let her use because he said she'd chew the cap. She did chew the cap on ballpoints, worry until the plastic split. The nib glinted in the flashlight beam like a tooth. It was a plain pen, black and gold, the kind that was meant for men who believe in firm handshakes. She hadn't seen it since the day after the funeral, when she'd woken up to find the house rearranged, things missing, and other things put in the wrong place with that newborn dread. Someone was here. Then she had remembered her sister, wiping down the counters while Mara slept on the couch with the TV on, the ceiling light a sharp silver coin. Kelly had put things away because she believed in putting things away. It was how she grieved. Mara had believed, that week, in letting everything stay out so the house could see how much it had lost. On the inside of the cedar box's lid, someone had scrawled a single word. It wasn't Nolan's handwriting, and it wasn't Kelly's. It was sharp, tall, vicious. The word was midnight. The flashlight sputtered and went dim. She shook it, and it brightened again, a heartbeat in a throat. She heard the sound from downstairs then, a single light ping, like a star falling into a glass, and then the phone. Not a ring, the ding of a text. One note. She stood too fast, her heart doing what hearts do when you tell them to slow down. She took one last look back at the notebook, at the pen, at the careful loops on the earlier letter downstairs, and told herself she was descending into a house she knew, not one that had quickened while she was away. Her sister's text said, "You need to call me now." The house had acquired a wet smell, like a coat hung too long in a closet. She turned on the kitchen faucet and ran water she didn't need. The letter was where she'd left it, only it wasn't. The first page had shifted, like a child edging inch by inch off a couch. The second page had been turned over. There was more writing now, in Nolan's hand. "Don't run. You'll think about it around noon. You'll calculate the distance to your car and imagine the speed you can make if you don't stop for the stop sign at the corner near the Red Rooster. You'll see your reflection in the windshield and think you look like your aunt when she was 30, and then you'll hate that thought, because you didn't like your aunt. You'll get in. You'll go. You'll pick the county road because you always pick the county road. You'll see the deer before the curve. You'll think about braking. You'll decide you won't make it. If you must go, leave at 12:06, take your father's hat, take the blue blanket, take the pen." "I didn't put that there," she said to the emptiness, to the refrigerator humming its hymn, to the letter that smelled now like fresh ink. Her mouth tasted like electricity. It was the taste when you lick a battery on a dare. It turned her stomach in flat, defeated circles. Kelly called again, and Mara answered. "Where are you?" Kelly's voice was one long exhale that tried to be words. "I tried earlier and—" "In the kitchen," Mara said. And because she heard how flat and strange she sounded, she added, "With the radiator, and the old clock that doesn't work, and the plant you gave me that I should water but I won't. Where would I be, Kel?" Kelly didn't laugh. "The box dash. I opened it." Silence on the line. The kind of silence that isn't empty but too full, like a closet packed to the hinges. "You weren't supposed to yet," Kelly said. And then, as if Mara had said something out loud that she had only thought, "No, that's not fair. That's not fair at all. I'm sorry. Listen to me. There was a day at the hospital. I didn't tell you. I took the pen because he asked me to. He said to keep it somewhere you'd find it when you wanted to." She swallowed. Mara heard coffee being set down somewhere on Kelly's side. "He wrote letters, March." "A lot of them. He gave some to me because he said if they stayed in the house they'd rust. He said he was putting them into the stream so they'd come back when you needed them." "Into the stream," Mara said. The phrase was still written inside her from the attic notebook, penciled on her spine. "The dead letter office?" "They threw those out years ago," Kelly said, in the small warning way she used to mean, "Don't say it if it's going to come true." "He mailed them to himself sometimes. He mailed them to you and then to no one. He did weird little things like that at the end. It made him feel like—" She stopped, then, "The point is, I think he really believes, Mara said, automatic and stubborn, "that the letters would arrive when they were supposed to." Mara looked down at Nolan's handwriting, the way it made her skin ache. "One arrived today?" "Okay," Kelly breathed. The air between them made a sound like a coat being shrugged on or off. "What's it say?" "Everything," Mara said softly. The day tipped into a mean early afternoon. The light outside grew thin and metallic, and the wind scraped the willow like a cat with opinions. Mara carried the letter with her as if it were a baby she couldn't trust on a couch, to the sink, to the stove, to the back door where she stood and watched a single crow lope along the fence like he was counting. She made herself a cheese sandwich and ate half of it and fed the other half to the garbage in the can. She texted Kelly nonsense because talking meant listening, and listening meant letting the letter climb into her head and curl up there. Her mind is your lap, it seemed to say, and who can resist a feral thing asking for warmth? At 3 o'clock, she napped on the couch because the letter said she would, and because she felt a sick desire to either prove it wrong in trivial ways or surrender to its easy prophecy. The nap was the shallow kind where trains run through your skull and every turn in the tracks is a voice. When she woke, there was a man in the living room. Her breath left and returned, left and returned. The man was not Nolan. He stood just inside the doorway, thin, hair long in the way of men who let everything grow in winter. He wore a dark jacket with a collar that tried to be fur but failed. His shoes were wet, leaving small ghosts on the floor. He held his hands at his sides like he didn't know where to put them. He had eyes that were tired and cautious and quick, and she thought of raccoons. She became another version of herself, the one she didn't like but had needed. Automatic, slim-voiced, capable of making decisions no one wanted to make. Who? He raised his hands, palms out. I'm sorry, Mrs. Halpern, Mara? Her married name. She hasn't used it in a year. The letter lay on her lap. She folded it instinctively, hiding the words. I knocked, the man said. The door was open. That's on me. I shouldn't have it's a boundary thing. He took a breath and found his pocket and pulled out a badge. Postal Service. The old seal with the eagle, embossed and important. My name's Victor. I work out of the distribution center in Saugerties. We got some returned mail from your husband. It pinged something in the system. The dates were weird. They wanted to see if it was fraud. We get a lot of that now. People using the old stamps, trying to reuse the same meterings. He's dead, Mara said. She didn't intend to be cruel. She only intended to close doors. My husband is dead. I know, Victor said, and his face did something like empathy but more careful. I'm sorry, I really am. I lost my wife 3 years ago. I'm still the most divorced man you've ever met. That's a joke. I'm sorry. Bad one. I shouldn't. He shook his head and took a half step toward the couch, then stopped. There was a letter today. It shouldn't have moved. It was in a bin that's been sealed for years. It shouldn't have come out this week. It shouldn't have found your address because your address wasn't attached to that. He stopped again. There's something messed up in our machine, or... He glanced down at her hands. Or it isn't messed up, or it's exactly right. You're saying, Mara said, and her voice had become a thread going out between them that could be snapped by a cough. You brought a letter to me that was supposed to be lost, and then it wasn't. Victor's eyes moved to the table. The envelope with the lighthouse stamp lay there, open. He looked at it and then away, as if seeing someone nap naked. These things happen, he said in a small voice. Not like this, but we get apology letters from the past sometimes. We get love letters that outlived the people who wrote them. We get things that were addressed to heaven, literally, with clouds drawn on. We do our best. Sometimes it feels like the machine knows more than we do. She didn't want him in her living room. In this place, Nolan had coughed out his last alarms. In this room, the radiator racked and yawed its warm complaints. She also didn't want him to leave because he was a witness, and it felt increasingly like witnesses stood between her and midnight like fence posts between a yard and a highway. I got a letter, she said. From my husband? Victor nodded without surprise. His hands moved to his jacket zipper and then away, like they were trained. He was a man who had been taught not to make sudden movements in other people's houses. May I see? She let him. He bent over the pages the way a priest bends over a body. He read, his eyes flicked. He read more. He did not make any of the small noises people make when reading, because he understood that noises become opinions if you aren't careful. "How much of today is true?" he asked finally. "All of it so far," she said. I took out the trash. She looked at the clock on the microwave because she couldn't stop herself, because time had become a light you can't help looking toward. I ignored my sister's call and then I answered. I'm thinking about running." He glanced at the line where the letter told her not to go, or to go differently. He didn't tell her what to do. He was not that kind of man, or maybe he was, once, and learned. He touched the page with a fingertip, barely, as if afraid to smudge not the ink but the intention behind it. "My wife mailed me one letter," he said softly. "She wrote it the day she found the lump, and I got it 2 weeks after she died. It told me to water the plant in our bathroom because she knew I'd forget, and it would hurt me if it died too. It said to take the dog to the park on Sundays because I would think about her more there, and it would make the thinking less heavy. It was a stupid letter about stupid things, and I carry it with me everywhere. I think she meant to write more, but one was all I got. Sometimes I think one is what I deserved." The dog outside barked again, louder. The radiator sighed, a broad, proud breath. "Will you stay until midnight?" Mara heard herself ask. "Just—" The beam of her mind found the staircase, the attic, the cedar box, and the pen with its little golden tooth. Victor's face went through a series of fast weathers. Rain stopped, sun laughed, wind worried. He was a man who had to tell people he was sorry as a job. "I can stay until 6, he said. "I have a route. I can come back later. I can leave you my number." He scrawled his name on the back of the bank envelope. He wrote his phone number in small, neat numbers and then made the last digit very large, as if to anchor it. "If I don't answer, it's because I'm in someone's yard, being chased by a generation of terriers. I will call you back." He left. The house took him in and let him go like an animal we're not sure we'll see again. Evening sharpened slowly, as if to spare her its edge. At 5:30, shadows began to have personalities. At 6, the house made its small old noises in a wall-to-wall conversation, the dryer inventing a new squeak, the upstairs window reconsidering its fit, the willow gently accusing. Mara made tea and forgot to drink it. She took down an old blue blanket that had belonged to her father, folded and refolded it, then wrapped it around her legs and immediately felt as if she had been preparing for a trip without knowing it. She sat at the table and wrote on the bank envelope with Victor's pen, "This is insane." She watched the words settle and felt nothing wiser for having made them. The letter on her lap breathed, ridiculous thought, and then relaxed again. She wanted it to purr, and she wanted to throw it in the trash and carry the trash to the curb and watch the truck with its beautiful iron teeth crush the letter into confetti. She called Kelly. "I wouldn't have kept it from you," Kelly said in the first breath, as if they'd been mid-argument. "He asked me to hold some until you were ready. But I think he also meant for them to arrive when I needed them," Mara said. "The stream." "I know." "You got one," Kelly said. "Yes? What's it say?" "I'm going to die at midnight." Silence. Then, "No." "Siblings don't get to do that," Mara said. "We don't get to make things untrue by refusing to accept them. We tried that with Dad's prognosis, and it bought us exactly 2 weeks of delusion and one horrible Saturday." "Then come here," Kelly said. "Come now, don't drive. I'll come get you. I'll bring the Cayenne. It handles like a dog that loves snow. I'll make chicken with lemon, and we'll put on the stupid show you love, and I'll sit on your bed until we both fall asleep. We'll dare midnight to knock, and when it does, we'll pretend to be people who don't answer the door." Mara felt a sweetness at the back of her throat that had nothing to do with tears. The letter says, "If I run now, I'll hit a deer on the county road. It tells me what to take if I leave after midnight." Dad's hat, the blue blanket, the pen. "The pen," Kelly said, as if this made sense. "Why the pen?" "Because he thinks writing things makes them happen," Mara said. "Or unhappen." "That's not how it works," Kelly said, and she made a sound like a page turning. "Except maybe it is sometimes. They didn't say I love you. They said good night like a promise." The call ended with an unaccountable burst of static that sounded like radio from the other side of town. Mara held the phone to her ear longer than she needed to, listening to the dark between calls. It made a sound like someone with their hand over their mouth. By 9, she had moved the cedar box upstairs. The pen lay inside, ready. She took her father's hat from its hook. Soft felt, the kind of hat men wore to jobs that required hands, and put it on because that made an animal part of her feel safer. She paced the bedroom and paused by the window and looked out at the willow. It was a mirror now, blackness reflecting blackness. Somewhere a neighbor's TV brightened with a laughter track. She tried the line on herself like a coat, "I am going to die at midnight." It fit too well in some places, bagged in others. The person she had been with Nolan would have laughed at how dramatic that sounded. The person she had been after Nolan would have found a way to make it into an appointment. The person she was now felt her heart as a small thing inside a larger machine, and the machine was old and kind and full of complaints, and that was good, because old machines do what they were built to do. They keep time. At 11:42, Victor texted, "On my way back. You still want company?" She didn't answer because making the decision felt like digging. She did not want another person to witness her failing to be clever. She wanted to be the only witness to herself, in case the letter was a joke or the universe was. At 11:58, she opened the cedar box and took out the pen. It felt warm. She found this insulting. She uncapped it and smelled ink, yes, and metal, and something like rain on a parking lot. Midnight is a hinge. The house felt it. The radiator gave a final sigh, the kind you make when you've been holding in a story all night and you finally get to tell it. The digital clock in the living room flicked toward its 2 green eyes of zeros like a frog deciding to jump. She sat at the desk by the window with the pen and a flattened piece of brown grocery bag because she couldn't find good paper and refused to use the letters back. The grocery bag bore the faint waxy outline of pears from a week ago. She wrote, "I will not." Nothing happened, which was the point or the problem. She wrote, "I will not die at midnight." The pen scratched. The nib carved little dry valleys at first and then found ink, and the letters rose, dark and committed, across the grocery brown. Her hand shook. She thought of Nolan writing lists, check oil, and call Larry and pick up bread. She thought of him writing Mara with that loop flourish, the way he had in her yearbook, the day after graduation when they'd been stupid with future. She thought, wildly, of forging her parents' signatures on permission slips, how as a kid she'd think that if she got the slant right the teachers would be fooled, as if the slant was the soul. The house changed its breathing. The radiator stopped. The willow outside went silent as if someone removed it. The whole structure, the wood, the nails, the paint with its thumbprint smudges, held its lungs full and waited. She signed the grocery bag, Mara, and looked at the letters as if they'd become a door she'd drawn on a wall. She waited. She felt the way her father had looked at storm clouds, the way babies look at light. There was a sound from the kitchen, a single light ping, like a star falling into a glass. Her phone lit and then died. Midnight. The green eyes of the microwave went blank, then returned. The house exhaled. She didn't die. She sat at the desk, her body slowly learning how to be heavy again. She looked at the letter on the bed, Nolan's letter, which lay with the offended posture of a cat you have moved. She stood and lifted it and folded it exactly as he would have, an old tender habit. She kissed the crease and felt absurd and loved. Her phone vibrated. From the front porch, the motion-activated light clicked on, then off again, then on. Someone was out there. She picked up her father's hat and the blue blanket without thinking because doing those things made her feel like she hadn't wasted the evening. She went downstairs, the house giving her the same creaks it always gave, as if to say, "You and I have been here before." She opened the door. The porch was empty. The light cast her shadow down the steps and into the yard. It was a long shadow, taller than the willow that had become an outline against a sky with no moon. When she turned, there he was. Nolan stood in the hallway, just beyond the spill of porch light. He wasn't the hospital version of himself. He was the man from 3 summers before, when they'd painted the bedroom and gotten paint in places that seemed like rumors when retold. He wore his old leather jacket and the T-shirt with the picture of the lighthouse, the same one as the stamp. He had a way of standing like the wind who wants to be your friend. His eyes were God. His eyes were Nolan's. No question, no seam. She did not scream. She did not run. She held the blanket and the hat and the letter and the pen, and she walked toward him the way she'd always walked toward him, as if there were a magnet under the floor. "You're very late," she said. And because she had imagined this moment too often, the sentence came out like an old joke. He smiled, and it was the smile she had married. But it was smaller, maybe because smiles get taxed crossing over. "You were supposed to come find me," he said softly, "on the county road." "I'm not a deer," she said. "No," he said, with the admiration he had used when she'd parallel parked perfectly on their 3rd date. "You're not." "You said I would die at midnight," she said, and hated how rusted her voice was with accusation. "I said you were going to die at midnight," he said. "Not that you had to. That's the part I couldn't write. That's not—" He lifted his hand, the way you lift your hand when it's heavy, not with blood, but with all the times it didn't get to be lifted. "I needed to make a stream for you to step into if you wanted. I needed to make a piece of future small enough to fit in your pocket. I didn't know if you'd want it. I didn't know if you'd throw it away." He looked at the pen. "I hoped you'd write over me." She looked at the pen in her hand. It was slick with sweat. "Why the hat?" she asked. "Because the small questions are the life rafts in a sea of big ones." "Your father's hat keeps the weather off," he said, and his expression was simple, unadorned. "You're going to need it." "Need it for—" she began, and then the house did a thing that houses do when they're about to empty. It leaned, just a degree. The light clicked off and back on. The sound of the refrigerator staggered and then steadied. "Don't go with me," he said suddenly, and she felt the old panic, the hospital panic, the kind where you're told to wave goodbye and smile so the nurses will like you. "Not now, not this way. That's not why I came. I came to say, I am sorry." His voice broke on that word invisible ways, for the things I didn't know how to say, for the way I left you with all this. He gestured around at the radiator and the willow and the anger and the bank envelopes and the way plates stack when there's only one set of hands. "I wanted to give you midnight as a door you could close. You always hated doors that stayed open." "I don't want to close this one," she said fiercely. "I know," he said, and his smile was so small she had to lean toward it, like toward a tea light outdoors. But you will, later. The stream will keep carrying me. I'll be where hard letters go. I'm not gone, just forwarded. He looked at the lighthouse on his shirt, as if checking the light. Do you remember that storm when the power went out and we put candles on the stairs and you said it felt like a ship? You said you could guide me by the tow light of each step. Yes, she said. Okay, he said. He took a step backward. Guide me now. She followed him as far as the living room. He stopped by the radiator. He'd always stopped there to warm his hands, the way a man might pause to pet a dog. He put his palm flat on the old iron. You live in a good house, he said. He kept stepping backward. The hallway narrowed. The porch light blinked on, off, on, as if trying to signal a number. He stood at the threshold and the air changed around him, the way air changes when you open a freezer in summer. He looked exactly like himself and not at all, and she accepted it the way you accept a crossword clue you know is unfair but fits. You wrote the letter, she said, crying now and not bothering to wipe it away. You wrote, you made, you did this. I made a promise, he said, to be late. So you'd have to wait and decide. You hate waiting, but it means you choose, not me. He tilted his head. Write to me, not to goodbye, to me, that's the trick. Then he was gone. The porch light stayed on like a lid. The willow sent a single hushed rasp across the yard. In the morning, Victor came with coffee and a donut in a bag, because that's what you bring widows if you grew up in a town that still knows what to do with grief. Mara hadn't slept. She wasn't tired. She felt like someone had jump-started her heart in the night and now it ran on a quieter current. He stood in the doorway the way men stand when they want to be a wall and not a person, and it breaks them a little. You okay? He asked. No, she said, and then, yes. On the table lay the grocery bag scrap with I will not die at midnight written in the stubborn slant of her own hand. The letters had bled slightly into the brown, as if thirsting. The letter from Nolan lay folded in thirds, precisely, a flag the size of her palm. The cedar box sat open, the pen asleep. Victor sipped coffee and told her about a letter they'd found once addressed to Santa in July, about the way people mailed money to strangers, about his wife, about the terriers. He didn't tell her what to do. He told her the dead letter office wasn't dead, not really. It had just been rebranded, lost and undeliverable. He said he liked the old name better. At least it told the truth about what hands could and couldn't do. When he left, the house settled again, a long, surfacing breath. Mara carried the pen upstairs and set it on the desk. She took out a clean sheet of paper from their old printer, the one Nolan had declared an enemy because it never once warned you before running out of ink. She wrote in her smallest, neatest hand, the hand she had used at 19 when she wanted to impress professors and distance herself from the girl who chewed pen caps. Nolan, I found your stream. Her phone buzzed. Kelly. Are you alive? Mara looked at the words and laughed, a quick, startled laugh that the house caught and held. She typed, yes. Then, I need you to do something with me. She sent Kelly a list, the names of 3 women in town who'd lost husbands that year, the ones who sat like cautionary tales and like saints at the back of church, and who were feared because grief had made them smart. She told Kelly to invite them for tea. She told her to tell them to bring any letters they'd found that arrived too late or too early or exactly on time. And she told her to tell them to bring pens. On her way to the mailbox at noon, because superstition is a map and maps comfort, Mara glanced down at the stamps she'd licked herself. Lighthouses, all of them. The old ones, discontinued but not dead. She wondered how many would find their way, now that the stream was awake. She wondered how many would wake people. The willow loomed in the mild light, its branches like hair after sleep. The dog down the block barked a small muffled bark, as if it were practicing to say a name. The air had changed. It smelled like cigarettes and winter. At the curb, a little boy on a scooter whizzed by, his scarf trailing like a comet. Whose boy, she thought. And then her breath caught because he turned his head to look at her, and his profile was exactly Nolan's at 8, the picture in the lunch box in the attic. He grinned at her and flashed past and was gone. She stood in the cold and let the idea of him be enough. She opened the mailbox and saw, astonished and not at all, a letter addressed to herself in Nolan's hand, the loops precise and patient, the ink settled like good advice. The postmark was smeared, a date you could squint into anything. Mara smiled and didn't open it. She turned and went back inside with the unopened letter against her ribs like a bird. In the corner of the porch, behind the lemon tree she'd dragged in for the winter, lay another envelope. Smaller, bluer, with a familiar hand, her own, on the front. The way she'd written Kelly's name had the cocky tilt she had as a teenager, the way she wrote "Girls Only" on their shared bedroom door in black marker that had never washed off all the way. "Kelly," it said, "open if I don't answer by midnight." She had no memory of writing it. She picked it up anyway, and before she could decide what to do with it, a small wet sound drew her eye. The blue ink on the K bleeding into the E, making their names run together in a word neither of them had been called before. She took a breath and, for the first time since the letter had arrived the day before, she realized she couldn't tell if the air going into her was the same as the air going out of her. It tasted different. It was heavier. It was exactly right. Upstairs, at the desk where she'd written "I will not die at midnight," the pen lay uncapped. A line had been added to the grocery bag scrap in her own small, neat hand. Letters walking one after another across the brown. She hadn't written it. She understood that more than she didn't. "Write to me," it said. She sat. She wrote.